everybody, what's up? Welcome back to A People's Historian, the show where we read about 30 minutes of history together. My name is Jason Kishinev, and we are reading State of War, The Secret History of the CIA and the Bush Administration by James Bryson. Remember, if you like what you see, hit the like and subscribe button, and hit that notification bell in case you get unsubscribed by Big Brother. Shall we dig in? Chapter 2. The Program. Bum bum bum. In February 1999, Michael Hayden, a balding and soft-spoken Air Force Lieutenant General from Pennsylvania, was nominated by President Bill Clinton to become the director of the National Security Agency, the largest organization in the United States intelligence community, double the size of the CIA, and truly the dominant electronic spy service in the world. For Hayden, a military intelligence officer who had begun his career as an analyst at the Strategic Air Command at the height of the Cold War, the new assignment was the great reward for nearly 30 years of hard slogging up the chain of command, for persistence in a career that Hayden must have at some point considered a dead end, particularly after a 4-year assignment in the 1970s in the most obscure corner of the Air Force as an ROTC instructor at tiny St. Michael's College in Winooski, Vermont. That must have felt like a dead-end job. Hayden was stationed in South Korea, serving in a senior staff position when his big promotion came. Coincidentally, Hollywood had just released a movie about the NSA, and it was showing in Korea as Hayden was preparing for his new assignment. Mike Hayden couldn't resist going to see Will Smith and Gene Hackman in Enemy of the State. Hayden was appalled. The movie showed the NSA as an evil, rogue organization that used its cutting-edge technology to spy on and persecute unwitting Americans. No! After thoroughly penetrating every aspect of his life, an NSA team of assassins tries to kill Will Smith, who plays a Washington lawyer whom the NSA bosses suspect knows too much about the agency's dark side. Smith is saved only after he befriends Gene Hackman, playing a reclusive former NSI technical wizard who turns the tables on the agency and helps Smith get the truth out. The film's message, that the NSA is an uncontrollable beast run by a cadre of ruthless bureaucrats secretly trampling on the civil rights of Americans, sent shivers through Hayden. Enemy of the State was one of the most prominent movies ever made about the NSA, and it reinforced every dark nightmare the American public had about the government's super secret eavesdropping and code-breaking apparatus. Please don't arrest me, NSA. I know you're watching. I don't believe any of it. It's all fiction. The movie came out just as a controversy over the NSA was breaking out in Europe as well, thanks to the agency's global surveillance programs known publicly as Echelon, through which it vacuums up communications around the world outside the United States. European politicians outside of the United Kingdom, where the Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, Britain's version of the NSA, cooperates with U.S. eavesdropping operations, were bitter that the United States was targeting its giant eavesdropping machinery at them. And their anger prompted some Americans to wonder whether Echelon was ever turned on inside the United States for use against political dissidents. Nah. the Electronic Privacy Information Center, a Washington group that tries to keep up with NSA activities, went to court to try to discover whether Echelon or similar programs were being used to spy on Americans. For an intelligence bureaucrat, Hayden responded to the controversies over Enemy of the State and Echelon in an unorthodox and creative way. Instead of denying the film's cultural influence or the growing public uneasiness over NSA's power, he realized that his agency had to open itself up to greater scrutiny in order to disprove the conspiracy theorists. The NSA, whose very existence had once been kept a state secret, had to start talking about itself. And it had to start dealing with the press. This was unprecedented for the NSA, and it was disorienting and shocking for the agency's old hands who had been trained never, ever to discuss their jobs, even with their husbands or wives. The NSA was at heart a blue-collar spy agency. It operated the intelligence plumbing, and so it tended to attract quiet technicians, math and linguistic geeks, and military and civilian managers who were bureaucratic conformists. None of them understood Hayden's desire to deal with the outside world, let alone the press. They knew that the public image of the NSA was a badly distorted cartoon, and they also knew that the agency had actually accomplished remarkable and politically risky things on behalf of the United States, almost none of which had ever become public. For example, in 1990, the CIA and NSA jointly stole virtually every code machine and their manuals in use by the Soviet Union, giving NSA's code breakers a remarkable advantage on Moscow. The CIA and NSA obtained the Soviet code machines in Prague and then flew them to NSA headquarters at Fort Meade, Maryland, to be carefully dissected. The operation was an espionage triumph, but one that NSA officials would never consider discussing publicly, even many years later. Better to let public misunderstandings about the NSA fester, the old-timers believed, than to disclose the agency's successes. But if NSA didn't start talking, Hayden feared, then urban legends about the agency would take hold in the national imagination, and support for it and its mission would erode. I made the judgment that we couldn't survive with the popular impression of this agency being formed by the last Will Smith movie, Hayden told CNN. The agency, Hayden promised, had learned its lesson from the dark days of the 1970s, when the domestic abuses of the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA were revealed by congressional committees chaired by Idaho Senator Frank Church and New York Congressman Otto Pike. Church and Pike discovered that the NSA had been involved, along with the FBI, in domestic spying on activists in the civil rights and anti-Vietnam War movements, also known as COINTELPRO. The NSA had been created in 1952 by President Harry Truman in order to consolidate the government's code-breaking and code-making capabilities, and initially there were few legal limits on the NSA's ability to conduct electronic surveillance inside the United States. But in the wake of the Church and Pike Committee disclosures, Congress passed a law in 1978 that required search warrants, approved by a secret court, for domestic wiretaps in national security cases. That law, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, also known as FISA, along with other new rules and regulations imposed on the intelligence community in the 1970s and 1980s, effectively ended the NSA's role in domestic surveillance operations. Notice the author doesn't say domestic surveillance didn't stop. He said the NSA stopped doing it. All those rules were put in place. The FBI, not the NSA, after those rules were put in place, the FBI, not the NSA, became the primary agent responsible for seeking approval from a special FISA court for national security wiretaps inside the United States. The NSA's domestic role was limited largely to such specialized intelligence activities as debugging of foreign embassies. That's right, Jean-Claude. And diplomatic missions in Washington, New York, and other cities, but even those operations required FISA search warrants. Hayden wanted the American people to know that the NSA was abiding by the rules. Could there be abuses? Of course there could, but I am looking you and the American people in the eye and saying there are not, Hayden told CNN. After Church and Pike on this question, the ball and strike count on the agency is no balls and 2 strikes, Hayden added. We don't take any pitches that are close to the strike zone. We are very, very careful. We can't go back to the American people with, oh, well, we're sorry for this one too. We don't get close to the Fourth Amendment. Hayden gave speeches. He went on television and he talked to newspaper reporters and to authors writing books about the agency. He even hosted off-the-record dinners for the press at his home at Fort Meade. A key element of Hayden's case was his argument that the NSA was struggling to cope with the rapid pace of change in an age of information overload, a new world of cell phones and Blackberries and internet telephone calls. The NSA was collecting more communications than anyone could ever listen to. Even its supercomputers with artificial intelligence software had trouble sorting the wheat from the chaff. Downplaying the NSA's capabilities, Hayden liked to say that the NSA was once an information age organization in the industrial age. It was losing its... and now it was information age organization in the information age. It was losing its competitive edge. Commercially available communications technology was catching up. Hayden's implicit message was that the NSA was too archaic, maybe even too incompetent to spy on America. Hayden didn't say that the NSA was a toothless giant, but he certainly wanted everyone to believe that the NSA was not to be feared. Despite what you've seen on television, our agency doesn't do alien autopsies, track the location of your automobile by satellite, nor do we have a squad of assassins, Hayden said reassuringly in a speech at American University in Washington 2000. The best I can hope for now is to wipe away some of the mystique surrounding the National Security Agency. But that was Michael Hayden before 9/11. Since the attacks, the NSA, with Hayden at the helm until 2005, has been transformed by the Bush administration in ways that Hayden and other administration officials don't want to talk about. In fact, for the first time since the Watergate era abuses, the NSA is spying on Americans again, and on a large scale. Please don't arrest me, NSA. I'm just reading a book. The Bush administration has swept aside nearly 30 years of rules and regulations and has secretly brought the NSA back into the business of domestic espionage. The NSA is now eavesdropping on as many as 500 people in the United States at any given time. and it potentially has access to the phone calls and emails of millions more. Are they watching you right now? Could be. They could be watching this episode, thinking, what a jackass, let's go arrest him. Is that you, NSA? Oh. It does this without court-approved search warrants and with little independent oversight. President Bush has secretly authorized the NSA to monitor and eavesdrop on large volumes of telephone calls, email messages, and other internet traffic inside the United States to search for potential evidence of terrorist activity without search warrants or any new laws that would permit such domestic intelligence collection, including my just saying the phrase terrorist activity may make this video come up on their list. Seriously, that may trigger the algorithm. Under a secret presidential order signed in early 2002, only months after the September 11th attacks, President Bush has given the NSA the ability to conduct surveillance on communications inside the United States. The secret decision by the president has opened up America's domestic telecommunications network to the NSA in unprecedented and deeply troubling new ways, and represents a radical shift in the accepted policies and practices of the modern U.S. intelligence community. In other words, our rights are under attack because this shit's still going on. The NSA is now tapping into the heart of the nation's telephone network through direct access to key telecommunications switches that carry many of America's daily phone calls and email messages. Several government officials who know about the NSA operation have come forward to talk about it because they are deeply troubled by it, and they believe that by keeping silent, they would become complicit in it. They strongly believe that the president's secret order is in violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which prohibits unreasonable searches. And some of them believe that an investigation should be launched into the way the Bush administration has turned the intelligence community's most powerful tools against the American people. One government lawyer who is aware of the NSA's domestic surveillance operation told reporter Eric Lichtblau that the very few people at the Justice Department who are aware of its existence simply refer to it as the program. Boom, boom, boom. It may be the largest domestic spying operation since the 1960s, larger than anything conducted by the FBI or CIA inside the United States since the Vietnam War. In order to overturn the system established by FISA in 1978 and bring the NSA back into domestic wiretaps without court approval, administration lawyers have issued a series of secret legal opinions similar to those written in support of the harsh interrogation tactics used on detainees captured in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Bush administration legal opinions that supported the use of harsh interrogation techniques on Al-Qaeda detainees have, of course, proven controversial, drawing complaints from allies, objections from civil liberties advocates, and court challenges. The administration faced its first serious legal rebuke in June 2004 when the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the administration's effort to hold enemy combatants without a hearing. The court warns that a state of war is not a blank check for the president. The same could be said about the program. Dun dun dun. Yet the NSA domestic spying operation has remained secret, and so the legal opinions and other documents related to the NSA program are still classified. The administration apparently has several legal opinions to support the NSA operation, written by lawyers at the White House, the CIA, the NSA, and the Justice Department. They all rely heavily on a broad interpretation of Article 2 of the Constitution, which grants power to the President as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Relying largely on those constitutional powers, Congress passed a resolution just days after the September 11th attacks, granting the President the authority to wage a global war on terrorism, and Bush administration lawyers later decided that the war resolution provided the legal basis they needed to support the NSA operation to eavesdrop on American citizens. Get it? While the Bush administration has never publicly discussed the NSA operation, the Justice Department did hint at the administration's thinking on domestic spying in a little-noticed legal brief in an unrelated court case in 2002. That brief said that the Constitution vests in the President inherent authority to conduct warrantless intelligence surveillance, electronic or otherwise, of foreign powers or their agents, and Congress cannot by statute extinguish that constitutional authority. The search for foreign agents had led the NSA to peer into domestic streams of data. Debate within the government about the moral and legal issues involved in the NSA operation has been extremely limited because only a handful of high-ranking government officials are aware of the existence of the eavesdropping program. It was a closed program, said one very senior administration official. People normally in the chain didn't have access to it. At the Justice Department, then Attorney General John Ashcroft was one of the few people informed, and he then brought in a small, select group of like-minded conservative lawyers to help craft some of the legal opinions to buttress the program. They may have been some of the same lawyers involved in the legal opinions supporting the harsh interrogation techniques. The NSA eavesdropping operation has been hidden inside a special access program, a level of secrecy reserved for the government's most sensitive covert operations. This is the biggest secret I know about, said one official who was deeply troubled by what he knew. Bush administration officials justified the presidential order by arguing that existing rules curbing the domestic powers of the NSA and CIA impeded the United States in detecting and preventing terrorist attacks. They say that the NSA domestic spying operation is critical to the global war on terrorism, although they offer few specifics. They have not explained why any terrorist would be so naive as to assume that his electronic communication was impossible to intercept. The small handful of experts on national security law within the government who know about the NSA program say they believe it has made a mockery of the public debate over the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act of 2001 has been widely criticized for giving the government too much power to engage in secret searches and to spy on suspects. And even some Republicans chafed at the idea of giving the government still more surveillance powers under an extended and expanded version. The Patriot Act has increased the ability of the nation's intelligence and law enforcement agencies to monitor conversations and internet traffic by terrorist subjects with the approval of the special FISA court. But it still requires the FBI to obtain search warrants from the FISA court each time it wants to eavesdrop on a telephone conversation. Each time it wants to eavesdrop on a telephone conversation, email message, or other form of communication within the United States. In order to obtain a warrant from the FISA court, the FBI must present evidence to show that the target is linked to a terrorist organization or other foreign agent or power. Even then, the FBI has, in comparison with the NSA, relatively limited technological resources and doesn't have the ability to monitor huge telecommunications networks. It lacks NSA's banks of supercomputers at Fort Meade, believed to be home to the greatest concentration of computing power in the world. Fort Meade. The Patriot Act has given no new powers to the NSA. The Bush administration purposely did not seek congressional approval for the NSA operation, apparently because the White House recognized that it would be too controversial and would almost certainly be rejected. There is nothing explicit in the Patriot Act for NSA, said one former congressional aide who was involved in the drafting of the Patriot Act, but who was unaware of the NSA operation. Their surveillance is supposed to be directed outside the United States. It is now clear that the White House went through the motions of the public debate over the Patriot Act, all the while knowing that the intelligence community was secretly conducting a far more aggressive domestic surveillance campaign. This goes way beyond the Patriot Act, said one former official familiar with the NSA operation. President Bush's secret order has given the NSA the freedom to employ extremely powerful computerized search programs originally intended to scan foreign communications in order to scrutinize large volumes of American communications. It is difficult to know the precise size of the NSA's operation, but one indication of its large scale is the fact that administration's officials say that one reason they decided not to seek court-approved search warrants for the NSA operation was that the volume of telephone calls and emails being monitored was so big that it would be impossible to get speedy court approval for all of them. I'm going to read that again. One indication of its large scale is the fact that the administration officials say that one reason they decided not to seek court-approved search warrants for the NSA operation was that the volume of telephone calls and emails being monitored was so big that it would be impossible to get speedy court approval for all of them. It is certainly true that when the FISA court was created, Congress never envisioned that the NSA would be involved in a massive eavesdropping operation inside the United States. No one in the 1970s could have predicted the enormous growth of telecommunications traffic in the United States or the degree to which Americans would become addicted to digital electronic communications. Today, industry experts estimate that approximately 9 million emails are sent in the United States each year. 9 trillion with the T. How did I read million? I don't know. It's late in the episode. I'm getting ready to sign off. Americans make nearly 1 billion with the B cell phone calls and well over 1 billion landline calls each day. NASA, I give up. I'm done. NSA's technical prowess, coupled with its long-standing relationships with the nation's major telecommunications companies, has made it easy for the agency to eavesdrop on large numbers of people in the United States without their knowledge. Following President Bush's order, U.S. intelligence officials secretly arranged the top officials of major telecommunications companies to gain access to large telecommunications switches carrying the bulk of America's phone calls. The NSA also gained access to the vast majority of American email traffic that flows through the U.S. telecommunications system. The identities of the companies involved have been kept secret. Unknown to most Americans, the NSA has extremely close relationships with both the telecommunications and computer industries, according to several government officials. Only a very few top executives in each corporation are aware of such relationships or know about the willingness of the corporations to cooperate on intelligence matters. Gonna have to tune into the next episode to hear more. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope to see you then. Hit that like and subscribe button for me, will ya? If you hit that notification bell, then you'll get notified when I make the next video. Sound like a bargain? Thanks for joining me.